What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing 5 cases of murderers who were haunted by their victims. In this community, we see all the time the horrors of what people can do to other people. Sometimes I wonder if we're any better than the animals, and most of the time, if I'm being honest, I believe we're far worse. Animals kill because they have to. They kill to protect themselves, their family, or their young. They kill for food and sustenance. They mainly teach their young to do the same. For an animal to attack, and remember, I'm only speaking generally here, it's usually an issue of territory or, again, protection. Human beings are horrible to each other, and today I'm going to be covering people who did the most horrific things to other humans and ended up haunted by the spirits and ghosts of those whose lives they took. I, for one, don't feel bad for them at all. As someone who can claim being haunted for apparently no reason, I know how horrific and terrifying it can be, and can only imagine how much worse it would be had I actually done something wrong to the ones or things haunting me. It's bad enough as it is. If you've ever seen or encountered a ghost, spirit, or unknown entity, you know the fear and dread that creeps over you, sometimes even when it's a deceased loved one. We talk about haunted houses and places all the time. We often speak of the dead and all manner of hauntings and unnatural occurrences our human minds can't or won't seem to wrap around. I am definitely going to get more in depth on hauntings, both of people and places, but figured this would be a nice little video to use as a jumping off point and see if you guys are interested enough for me to go more in depth with cases like this. So here you go, a short list of some people I came across who claimed to be haunted by the spirits and ghosts of those they murdered. In 1999 in Hong Kong, there was, and probably still is, allegedly, a secret triad gang society from which 3 members decided to spend an entire month torturing a young woman named Fan Mei Yi, who they said owed them Hong Kong $20,000. I don't think they have dollars in Hong Kong, but it was like 20,000 Hong Kong monies. Whether she did or didn't owe them the money, they did some pretty horrific things to her though. After they were done with her, it was a little over a month that they had held her captive and tortured her. They cut up her body and boiled the parts. They then took these parts and threw them away in various trash bins around the area where the murder took place. One of the men had a 13-year-old girlfriend they recruited to help them in the tormenting of this poor and most likely innocent young girl, and in the end, she would be their downfall. Well, her and the ghost of Fan Mei Yi. The 13-year-old is only known as Ah Feng, and she called the police and confessed, telling them she was having nightmares every single night where the ghost of the victim was tormenting her, possibly to turn herself and the men in for what they had done so they could be held accountable and she could be at peace. The police thought that she was just a quote-unquote delirious 13-year-old girl, possibly trying to exact some kind of twisted revenge on her now ex-boyfriend. It turns out, after investigating the home of one of the men she had accused and finding evidence of the death, and also they went and found some of the pieces of Fan Mei Yi's body, the 3 young men were sentenced to life in prison after being convicted of manslaughter. Ah Feng was given immunity for her testimony. Hopefully Fan Mei Yi can finally be at peace now, despite all of her body and remains never being found and put to rest. In 2013, a man named Victor Amewuga went on a sort of killing spree. He hired a taxi and once inside pulled out a knife and murdered the driver. He then stole the taxi. Probably being emboldened by getting away with it the first time, he did it again not too long after. However, the second time while driving off in his victim's taxi, he was joined by the ghost of the first victim. Victor would later claim that the ghost would ride in the passenger seat wherever he went, and it would attack and haunt him relentlessly. The ghost appeared in his dreams and would abuse him by doing things like punching and slapping him while he slept. Eventually, he became a suspect in the murders of the 2 taxi drivers and decided it would be best if he went on the run. He didn't run alone though. The second victim's ghost followed and stayed with him wherever he went, to the point where he hadn't been able to sleep in weeks and even went with him on the run. The torture he claims to have endured by the ghost was said by Victor himself to be unbearable. Finally, he confessed to a friend and told what he had done to both taxi drivers. He didn't leave out a single detail, as he was most likely being prompted to do this in exchange for his sanity by the angry spirit. His friend wasn't willing to keep his secret, it seems, because almost immediately upon his confession, the friend went to the police and turned Victor in. He even told the police that Victor was still driving the second dead man's taxi. Side note, this could possibly be why he was able to be so incredibly haunted and abused, but that's just my own opinion and speculation. Police found and arrested Mr. Amewuga, and he almost immediately confessed. He expressed deep regret for his actions and even advised fellow inmates that they should change their lives or otherwise end up haunted like he was for their actions. Let's talk about one now that many of us know well. I know I do. On Valentine's Day in 1929, 7 associates of the North Side Gang met at a garage in town. Jimmy Clark was one of the members and part of the 7. As the group was standing there, I guess doing whatever it was a group of young thugs did back on the 14th of February in 1929, 4 men approached them. 2 were dressed like police officers and ordered the men to turn and line up facing a nearby wall. As soon as all 7 men were turned around and lined up, the 4 other men, including the quote-unquote cops, opened fire and sprayed bullets into the men. All 7 in the group ended up dead and on the ground, and the 4 assailants fled. The case was never solved, but it was assumed by pretty much everyone involved that Al Capone was responsible for this, quote, St. Valentine's Day massacre, end quote, as it had come to be known. Al Capone was the leader of a rival gang, the aptly named Southside Gang, and everyone believed he did it but never had any proof or tangible evidence, and Capone was never held accountable for this particular crime. Al Capone was arrested about a month later for something unrelated, and the prison guards reported something that some could say was a huge indication of his guilt in orchestrating this massacre. The guards would later say that at all hours of the night, all throughout that part of the prison where Capone was being held, blood-curdling screams could be heard. Al Capone would scream in the night and yell, beg, and plead for quote-unquote Jimmy to leave him alone. Even after Al Capone was released from prison on that particular charge, it seems the ghost of Jimmy Clark followed him. Capone even hired a medium to try and exorcise the spirit, or at least get it away from him. Unfortunately for Capone, though, she didn't do a good enough job. Throughout the entire rest of his life, his bodyguards would report that Capone would yell and scream in the night, begging for someone to leave him alone. He wasn't always sleeping either. Sometimes it was simply while he was lying there and just trying to get some rest. Eventually, it started to happen even when he was alone and just sitting in his office or his car. When they would hear this, of course, they would race to wherever Capone was, and every single time, without fail, Capone would be alone. He actually came out and told his bodyguards that he was being haunted by James Clark's ghost. In 2002, in South Africa, a man named John Kuna and 2 of his buddies decided, for some unknown reason, to kidnap a man named Rob Ruel Beloyi. They beat him severely after tying him up with pieces of cloth. The 3 kidnappers then doused the poor guy with gasoline and set him on fire. They burned him alive. About a week later, a random cattle herder found the charred remains and, of course, called the police. I'm not sure what happened to the other 2, but Kuna fled to a neighboring city in order to try and evade the authorities. However, almost immediately upon the body being found, Kuna would later say that every night when he closed his eyes to go to sleep and all throughout the day, following him as if his own conscience, he heard the voice of his victim whispering in his ears. It would always say the same thing, quote, just tell my parents that you are the one who murdered me and you'll start sleeping in peace, or else you'll follow me, end quote. Probably he meant he would follow him to his being tortured to death, but that's pure speculation. Kuna was obviously very scared, and not too long after, he did end up going to confess to the Bayoli family. All 3 men ended up being arrested, and no doubt Kuna rolled on his friends, sang like a canary probably in the first few seconds of being interviewed. Kuna was the only one who would face trial, though, as for some reason the charges against the other 2 were withdrawn. Kuna did end up pleading not guilty in court, but the police already had his confession and were able to use it in court to get a conviction. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. No word on whether or not he is still haunted, but if I were a betting woman, I would say no. It's uncommon and nearly unheard of for vengeful spirits to lie about why they're being so vengeful. In 2010, a young woman named Jennifer Stewart was axed to death in a parking lot, and her seemingly random murder went unsolved for 3 years. There were no clues and no leads until a man named Adrian Dayu walked into the police station and confessed to the heinous crime. The police were actually skeptical at first and didn't believe that Adrian was the killer. His information was inconsistent and contradictory, but Adrian insisted he was the killer. The police gave him a cardboard tube and told him to reenact the murder, showing where the blows landed on poor Jennifer. After he did this, the police were more than convinced, and he was arrested and charged with the crime. This is when the most ridiculous confession I have ever heard in my entire life happened. So this guy says that he murdered Jennifer and it was completely and totally random. She really was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You see, Adrian was trying to get started with a rap career and thought being a murderer and having killed someone would give him more street cred. He said he thought if he killed someone, he would, quote, be a really good rapper because people talk about that killer stuff, end quote. Adrian said that he immediately, after killing Jennifer, went into the park to smoke a joint on a bike path, and that's when Jennifer's ghost flew by him. She flew over his head again and again. He claimed to have seen her ghost or spirit at least twice a day for the entire 3 years up until he finally confessed. Most likely the visitation stopped upon the confession, but that's all I got. In 1987, a man named Terry Childs stabbed 17-year-old Lois Sigala to death. He was sentenced to 41 years, and that was that. Except it wasn't. While incarcerated, Terry confessed to several more murders. One of his other victims was Linda Ann Jozovic, who in 1979 he kidnapped from a parking lot. He then proceeded to beat, strangle, and repeatedly stab her. He then went to the mountains in Santa Cruz and hid her body. It took more than a decade for her remains to be uncovered, too. He said that the reason he had to confess to the additional murders was because he had to, quote, free himself of his demons, end quote. They would visit him in his cell and make him watch as they were, quote, eating up his brains, end quote. He claimed that Miss Jozovic was the one who haunted him the worst, but that once he confessed, she left him alone. No word on who his other victims were or if they too let him alone upon his confession. In a way, I hope they did, because that most likely means they were souls at peace, but in a way I don't, because this piece of shit should be haunted and terrorized for the rest of his life until his fear of death is so palpable it kills him. Almost kills him, actually, because death brings peace and awareness, and I want him and everyone like him to be terrorized and tortured for as long as humanly possible. In our last piece of utterly useless human waste, at least for this video, allegedly, is a man named Jose Ferrer, and it takes place in 1982. He was just 17 years old when at a party with some friends one night, he met 13-year-old Carrie Ann Jopek. The two shared a joint, and then Carrie allegedly asked Jose to accompany her to the basement. The two were walking down the basement stairs, Carrie in front, when the little girl started to change her mind. She turned to the almost grown man behind her and told him that maybe this wasn't a good idea and asked him to move so she could get by. She wanted to go back upstairs. He looked at her right in the eyes and said, quote, no, you're going downstairs, end quote, and then proceeded to push her down the steps. Once he got down the steps himself, he sexually assaulted the unconscious girl, and once he was done, I'm sure just a few seconds later, allegedly, whatever, got up and got himself together only to realize he had just assaulted a corpse. Carrie had been killed by the fall from the push he gave her the rest of the way down the stairs. Her neck was broken. Somehow, even in what I think would be a panicked state, he managed to sneak her dead body out of a house full of young people all drinking and getting high. He buried her body under a neighboring house's porch, and it wasn't discovered for 17 months. Police had no leads, and there were no clues left behind. Nobody knew what had happened to poor 13-year-old Carrie Ann. Eventually, though, Jose went to the police and had confessed what he had done. He claimed that he had to do this because the little girl's spirit had haunted him since the night he had killed and disposed of her. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and spread the love by sharing this video. So I've been doing a few of these list videos, at least for the past week or two, just to see if you guys like this type of content. You know I like in-depth videos because I enjoy the research and information. So if you would like to see a list video like this one every once in a while, let me know. And don't be afraid to email me if there's something you'd like me to cover as well. I'm going to probably do the longer versions of some of the cases that come up in the lists. While I'm trying to be more vigilant about responding to and reading comments, I'll never see all of them, so please, if you have a suggestion, email it. Thanks. So, again, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and spread the love by sharing this video. I already said that, I think. It's been a long day. In the description box, you will find links to my live stream on Wednesday nights that I do right here from 7:15 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, where I do a one-card pull intuitive oracle read for anyone and everyone who comes in and wants one, first come, first serve basis. If you would like a personal intuitive oracle reading with me for the month of April, possibly longer, I'm not sure, but for this month, I'm doing them for donation only again, like I used to. So please email me at MoonBearOracle@gmail.com. That's MoonBearOracle, all one word, @gmail.com. If you have any encounters with the supernatural and or paranormal that you would like me to make a part of my listener encounters series, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. GemmaJadeParanormal, all one word, @gmail.com. I try to keep the emails separate so I know what to expect when I open each email account. Also in the description box, you will find links to the weekend show, the after hour show on SOR on Saturday and Sunday nights from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern time with myself, the Fedorable John Hudson, and Big Willie Townsend. Ways to donate to the channel: PayPal, Patreon, Cash App, an Amazon wishlist gift link, and the link for my book on Amazon, which is Missing the Fae Theory by Gemma Jade, both Kindle and paperback versions. I don't think I'm forgetting anything, so be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything and can make you feel so good. It costs nothing to be a kind, decent human being. Also, though, be kind to yourself and make sure you accept nothing less than others being kind to you. Let me know what you think. Let me have some suggestions. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.